Hi folks, how you doing? It's James, JT at the movies, and we're back for the final instalment of Debriefing 007. I'm over the moon that we've made it this far, both you guys as obviously viewers and me creating the content as well. It's been a great ride this past sort of 18 months or so. I've probably been doing this series now, and I really do appreciate all your support along the way. Let's dive in to currently the most recent Bond film, 2015's SPECTRE. So, SPECTRE, again directed by Sam Mendes, the producers were able to entice him back to come back and do the follow-up story and the sequel. He originally wasn't going to come back and do another one. He was sort of thinking he was going to be a one-and-done Bond director, but they had obviously such a fantastic response to Skyfall being a commercial and critical success that Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson were like, no, come on, we've got to have you back to make another one. And so they obviously worked out a deal that meant that he'd come back. As well as that, at some point in the recent Bond history, the rights to SPECTRE had finally returned to Eon Productions from the estate of Kevin McClory, which meant that they were finally able to use the character of Blofeld and the organisation SPECTRE. Now that they had the rights back to the intellectual property, the producers decided that they were going to put it to use straight away and designed the follow-up to Skyfall to include the organisation SPECTRE and its villainous head Blofeld. Now that was going to be a big reveal and was meant to be a twist in the film, but actually due to some Sony email hacks, the script and the synopsis for SPECTRE was released onto the internet about 18 months before the film actually came out. Barbara and Michael, Daniel Craig and Sony Pictures, the distributor, all reassured fans that the leaks weren't genuine and that Blofeld wasn't going to be featured in the new film and it was going to actually be an original villain, Franz Oberhauser, played by Christoph Waltz. But of course we all now know that was them just trying to firefight an unfortunate situation, and unfortunately due to some horrible person hacking in and then releasing all that information, the big twist was revealed. Now for me, I don't know if that maybe hindered my enjoyment of this film a little bit, because I went into it under the impression that Oberhauser was going to be revealed to be Blofeld. I just sort of thought, yeah, I'm not too sure here. I just kind of feel like the leaks were genuine. Obviously, they turned out to be, and it was one of those things where it sort of took a bit away from it for me, which is a shame. This film is not a great film, to be fair. Now, when I watched it in the cinemas for the first time, I went with an old work buddy of mine, a lad called Ed. He's a great lad, and we were both hyped to go and see it, and went the opening night that it came out. And we both came out of it and went, oh my god, that was as good as Skyfall, if not better, and, you know, best Bond film of the last 10 years, and all the usual sort of hype that you would expect from a Bond fan. But that's the thing, is when I got it on Blu-ray when it came out on home media, I actually couldn't get through it. So I really enjoyed the first act and the build-up around, you know, what's going on and what is SPECTRE, what is this organisation, who is Oberhauser, and where does Bond fit into this whole story. Really enjoyed that build-up. The second act where we meet Madeleine Swann and we go on the adventure from there, really liked that. But the third act did something really, really, really silly, in my opinion, with the Blofeld reveal, which I'll talk about more when we get to the plot recap in a minute. And I just lose interest at that point, and I've actually rarely been able to sit through the third act of this film for basically thinking it's just too daft. And that's really saying something when, you know, obviously you've got the likes of Die Another Day and Moonraker in this series. Just feeling that something was just too daft, and I just turn it off. This most recent rewatch, I actually had a really good time with it. I actually watched it on Thursday just gone. This is Sunday evening, and tomorrow morning, Monday, you guys will be getting this live on the internet. And I had a really good time with rewatching it. But I'll be honest, I think a lot of that came from the hype of knowing that it's not the current final instalment in the series, and that there's actually, in, you know, just a few short days away, and I'm touching wood off screen here, folks, to, you know, God forbid that there's another delay or anything at this stage, but in just a few short days, I'll have seen No Time to Die, and this won't be the most recent Bond film. And I'm really excited to see how they wrap up Daniel Craig's tenure in the role. But enough about No Time to Die. Of course, I'm going to be making plenty of videos about that. Shall we dive into a bit of a plot recap for SPECTRE? So, first things first, folks. Hooray, hurrah, amazing. The film opens with a classic gun barrel sequence. Well, almost. The dots come across the screen, the traditional design is there, Craig walks on suited and booted and shoots, and the blood comes down. Rather than the circle opening up into the story of the film, we get a title saying the dead are alive. We then jump into this film's pre-title sequence. The pre-title sequence is James Bond on an unauthorised mission in Mexico. He's there on the Day of the Dead festivities, and he manages to uncover and stop a terrorist plot to set off a bomb in a stadium led by terrorist Marco Sciarra. Bond is able to kill Sciarra in a fight that takes place in a helicopter of all things, not before blowing up a block in Mexico beforehand in the middle of the festivities. Bond manages to kill Sciarra, and in the fight takes off his finger a ring that's engraved with the emblem of an octopus, which becomes relevant later on in the film. Bond then kills the pilot and escapes in the helicopter. It's really simple as the pre-title sequence story, but the one thing that I really wanted to talk about in this video that I thought was absolutely fantastic is that Sam Mendes used a James Bond film, the biggest franchise, or one of the biggest franchises in film history, to try something out for his next film. And I just think that's absolutely fantastic. So eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed that this film, in the opening sequence at least, uses what they call a tracking shot. And that is where essentially us as the audience member are another person along for the journey in the story, what's going on. We're like an unnamed third character, if you like, and we follow Bond all in one shot. And if you look at the entirety of the opening sequence until we get to the helicopter chase, it's all filmed in one shot, and at some point, we're following Bond and he's either in front of us or we're at the side of him or we're watching him, and it's like, say, we're almost in and amongst the action. Now, the film 1917, which was Sam Mendes' next film after this film, is shot entirely like that for the entirety of the film, and it's the story of obviously two lads going from one camp in World War I to warn the soldiers at the next camp, and we follow them essentially as though we're the third soldier, and that's how you view that film. And I think it's really, really brave but also fantastic that Mendes wanted to try that on a James Bond film. Of course, the scene works absolutely fantastically, and I think it really lends something to it as well. I'm going to touch on it a little bit more at the end of this video, but for Christmas just gone, which is, we're almost at Christmas again, aren't we, in a sense, but the Christmas just gone, my mum and her husband got me the 4K Blu-ray box set of the Daniel Craig era films, obviously the only ones so far to be released, and these films look absolutely spectacular, and that scene in particular, the tracking shot scene throughout the opening sequences of the film, looks absolutely superb. As always, we get a title sequence, again designed by the rightful heir, Daniel Kleinman. He does a fantastic job again. The title sequence uses the dancing girls, it uses Bond's imagery, and of course foreshadows some of the things that are going to happen in the film, much as they do with most modern Bond films. The song is a song I'm not too keen on. It's Writings on the Wall by Sam Smith, and I get that they probably wouldn't have been able to write a song called Spectre that maybe would have worked, sort of thing. But I don't mind the title of Writings on the Wall, and again it sort of plays a sort of a bit of a slight nod to something that happens later on in the film. I'm not the biggest fan of this song though, folks. I don't know whether it's just because I'm not really a Sam Smith fan anyway. I obviously loved Skyfall, but I do like Adele's music, and it's probably similar with the White Stripes one, the Jack White song from Quantum of Solace. I'm not a White Stripes fan. I'm not really a Jack White fan. I don't mind some stuff he's done with one of the other bands, Raconteurs, he was with, but this is getting off into a real tangent, isn't it? But I don't know whether it's just the not particularly liking the artist that's made me not like the song. However, what I will say is, in the context of the film, I thought that it worked much better than when I sort of heard it as a single on the radio first. We then come out of the title sequence and we're back in London. Bond is being suspended from active duty by the new M, Gareth Mallory, again played by Ralph Fiennes, and I'm really, really glad that he agreed to come back and do another Bond film, and obviously he's going to be again in No Time to Die. If they can keep him on after the reboot with the next actor, I would be over the moon with that. I've said for years, and my dad used to say when he was alive as well, that Ralph Fiennes would make a fantastic M, and he really does. He's superb in the part. But M then chastises Bond for the events that happened in Mexico, and as I say, suspends him from active duty. M reveals that he's engaged in a bit of a power struggle at this moment in time with Max Denby, who is kind of like M's sort of opposite number in MI5, and is the general director of a joint intelligence committee that's pioneering an intelligence program linked with multiple countries called the Nine Eyes. Bond's introduced to Denby, who he dubs C. C is actually campaigning for the 00 section to be shut down, as he believes that their method of working is outdated and that the work can be done through other intelligence means, through the likes of drones and camera work and things like that, and that it's outdated, which is a theme sort of carried over from Skyfall, really, because this was sort of Mallory's position when he was taking over from Judi Dench's M. After his suspension, Moneypenny goes to visit Bond at his flat and brings him some artefacts that were recovered from the ruins of Skyfall. It's there that Moneypenny sort of challenges Bond a bit and says that he's maybe gone too far this time by acting on his own authority. It's at that point that Bond shows Moneypenny a message from the former M, Judi Dench's M, that was sent to him days later after she died in the post. The message says that if anything should happen to her, Bond should track down Marco Sciarra, the terrorist Bond killed in the pre-title sequence, that he should kill him and then not miss the funeral. M gives Bond the orders that he needs to stay in London while suspended, and has Q implant Smart Blood, a tracking device, an updated version of what he was implanted with in Casino Royale. Bond then manages to persuade Q to say that the Smart Blood isn't active for 48 hours so that Bond can go to Rome for Sciarra's funeral. Bond then heads to Rome where he attends the funeral of Sciarra. He also meets up with Sciarra's widow Lucia. He later saves her from an assassination attempt and then seduces her. He assures her that he'll be able to get her to safety and leaves her with Felix Leiter's contact information. Using the ring that he took from Sciarra at the start of the film as an identification piece, Bond then heads to the organisation that Sciarra belonged to's meeting in Rome, where they're looking to select a replacement for Sciarra among the ranks. It's at this meeting that we're introduced to the film's lead villains. Firstly, Mr. Hinks, played by Dave Bautista, who's really probably sort of the henchman, the heavy of this film, and he's kind of got a bit of a Red Grant thing mixed with Jaws going on, if that sort of makes sense. And his gimmick is that he's got metal thumbnails, and he uses them to great effect in only one scene, and it's the scene that we're introduced to him in. He doesn't really get much to do for the rest of the film other than sort of show up and look scary, which is a shame, because I'm sure he could have been a really, really strong henchman, but in a sense we just get a bit of a brute. And, you know, whilst Batista is not necessarily the best actor in the world, he's certainly capable of more than the film gave him to do. We're also introduced to the main villain, more importantly, of this film, Franz Oberhauser, who was, obviously, I mentioned earlier, is revealed to be Blofeld later on in the film. But Franz Oberhauser is the adoptive brother of James Bond and has been believed dead for 20 years. Just before Bond escapes the organisation's meeting, Oberhauser orders for the Pale King to be assassinated. Bond then escapes into Rome with his car, and Mr. Hinks soon gives chase. A great little car chase ensues that actually has some really well-placed comedic moments, and I do think that it's one of the highlights of the film is the little car chase. Bond, thinking that he's about to be caught by Hinks as he's running out of road, as he's driving alongside the river, ejects from his car. As the car crashes into the river, he lands safely on the roadside, and he manages to get a Bond one-liner in there as well, which is great. If they're done right, I really like the Bond one-liners. Sometimes they can take the films too seriously, and as much as I love Timothy Dalton's portrayal of James Bond, and obviously folks will know he's my favourite James Bond, Licence to Kill is my favourite of the series, I think sometimes they can actually take a bit of a step too far into the dark and gritty, and it is about finding a balancing act. And I would say that whilst the film that surrounds him isn't amazing here, Daniel Craig has pretty much got that balancing act down to a fine art. Bond is then in contact with Moneypenny, and she agrees to look into Oberhauser. She also reveals that the Pale King is an alias for a former Bond villain that we've met in films gone by, and that's Mr. White. So folks will probably remember that he was one of the leading villains of Casino Royale and the secondary villain of Quantum of Solace. And it actually also turns out that Quantum is a subsidiary, if you like, a part of this larger organisation run by Oberhauser. With the help of Moneypenny, Bond manages to locate Mr. White in Austria, where he heads to meet him and finds that Mr. White is actually dying of thallium poisoning. One of the organisation's agents had actually managed to poison Mr. White months previous, and White explains that he's probably only weeks to live. Mr. White agrees to help Bond and asks him to track down his daughter, Dr. Madeline Swan, this film's leading lady, played excellently by Léa Seydoux, as she'll be able to lead Bond to L'Américain, and L'Américain will be able to lead Bond to Oberhauser's location. Bond agrees that he will go meet with Swan and do his best to protect her. It's at that point that Mr. White, rather than waiting for an organisation agent to come and kill him, commits suicide. I did think this was an interesting choice for this character on the part of the producers and the writers. Obviously, they had big plans for Mr. White, and I think had they not have got the Spectre rights back, that they were sort of setting this guy up as the new Blofeld, if that makes sense. They wouldn't have been able to use the name without the rights, but I really think that they were starting to set this guy up as the new big bad. So it's an interesting choice for them to sort of just have him turn up just to kill him. It might have been interesting to keep him alive and have him sort of pop up as a bit of a reoccurring sort of nemesis, if you like. Bond then goes to meet with Madeline, initially posing as a client. He then starts to ask her questions about L'Américain, about her father, about the organisation, and she asks him to leave. Ultimately, Bond ends up rescuing her from Mr. Hinks and his men in a car and plane chase throughout the Austrian mountains, which is beautiful. It looks great. I always love when Bond's in the snow. I think there's just something really, really cool about that imagery, and this scene is no exception with that. Once they've escaped, the pair then meet up with Q, where Q has been able to decode from the ring that Bond managed to get from Sciarra at the start of the film that Oberhauser is in fact alive and has been the ringleader and the mastermind behind all of Bond's previous missions, and that Le Chiffre, Dominic Green and Raoul Silva were all agents of this mysterious organisation. It's at that point that Dr. Swan Madeline is able to reveal to us that the organisation's name is SPECTRE. Madeline then takes Bond to L'Américain, which actually turns out to be a hotel in Tangier and not a person at all. There, Mr. White has a secret room hidden in his favourite hotel suite, which has all sorts of classified information about Spectre's dealings over the years. It also has the location of Oberhauser's hideout in the Sahara Desert. Bond and Madeline then take a train into the Sahara as they plan to go to Oberhauser's base. On the train, they're confronted by Mr. Hinks and a fight ensues. And it's a really, really good fight to start with. And Bond's really trying his best to hold his own against Hinks, and Madeline shoots Hinks, trying to obviously subdue him, and only grazes his arm. And then it has a really, really silly ending, and like I say, a bit of a waste of a character, really. They manage to wrap a chain round his neck, and then the chain is attached to some barrels of beer, which they kick out the door. And then as the barrels are coming off, it pulls Hinks out with them. And the only word he says in the film, like I say, because he's mute, apart from this one word, he just goes, shit. And then gets pulled out of the train. Now, I honestly thought he was going to pop up again. The first time I watched this, I thought, that's not the last we've seen of him. He's going to turn up in the end battle or whatever. But no, that's him. He's done. And unless on Wednesday night when I go to see No Time to Die, we get an interesting reveal that he survived, that's the character done and dusted with. And I can't think that they'd bring him back and keep it a secret for No Time to Die. I can't really see where he'd fit into it all, and why there'd be a need to keep it a secret. Bond and Swan then sleep together on the train, and when they get off at the station in the middle of the Sahara Desert, they're soon picked up by one of Oberhauser's men. They're taken to a complex which, I have to say, as a Bond fan, immediately reminded me of the complex where Dr. No held Bond and Honey Rider in that first film. It gave off similar vibes, even though obviously the setting that they were in was much more modern and in a completely different location. And I'm not entirely sure, I can't put my finger on what made it feel so similar, but hats off to the set designers and the producers for making it feel Spectre-y, if that makes sense. It was one of the few moments in the film where they actually made Spectre feel like Spectre. Bond and Madeline then meet up with Oberhauser, where he reveals that the Nine Eyes intelligence program has been funded by Spectre, and that C is actually a Spectre agent, and that they will have control of the 9 most powerful countries in the world's intelligence systems once the deal goes through. He also reveals that the terrorist plan at the start of the film that Bond managed to foil, and other terrorist plans that have been mentioned throughout the course of the film, were all orchestrated by him to show the world that there was a need for such a program as the Nine Eyes. Bond is then tortured by Oberhauser, whilst Oberhauser recounts to Madeleine the fact that they were adoptive brothers and that after Bond's parents had died, Oberhauser's father Hans took Bond in and became his temporary guardian, and that he taught him to ski. Oberhauser, being jealous of his father's affection for Bond, ultimately decided to kill him and then adopt his mother's family name. When this is the point in the film where he goes, "No, James, Franz Oberhauser died in an avalanche 20 years ago. The man you're talking with today is Ernst Stavro Blofeld." And again, that was a moment in the cinema. I hoped it wasn't coming, but I knew that it was. I'd seen the leaks and I'd seen the headlines and the Total Film articles and the Reddit and the YouTube stuff, and it was like, oh, please don't be true. And then it was true. And Christoph Waltz, I mean, who else could play such a fantastic modern Blofeld, really? The guy is the perfect casting. And they make him a spoiled child. He's basically set up an international terrorist organisation with the ultimate goal of being to destroy his little brother. And that just seems ludicrous to me. When you go to the Blofeld of the earlier films, or even Blofeld back in Fleming, they don't have any prior connection, and they become arch nemesis over the death of Tracy, and it just really feels shit. I can't think of a better way to describe it, and sorry for that, folks. It just seems like such a waste of a character, such a waste of Christoph Waltz, and the reveal's just daft, and the reasoning behind it all is even dafter. Bond then uses his exploding wristwatch to distract Blofeld, scarring him in the process, giving him the iconic Blofeld look that we see in the third act of the film. At that point, Bond and Madeleine manage to escape, blowing up the facility in the process. The third act of this film takes place in London. Bond and Swan meet up with M, Tanner, Moneypenny and Q, where they reveal that Franz Oberhauser is now Ernst Blofeld, and that his grand plan is to get Nine Eyes online and that C's a bad guy. Bond and Swan are actually captured by SPECTRE agents at separate points, but the rest of the MI6 team head off to go and stop C from launching the Nine Eyes system and arrest him. Q's able to stop Nine Eyes from going online, and in a struggle between M and C, C ultimately falls from his penthouse office down the open shaft of the middle of the building to his death. Bond is taken to the abandoned MI6 building which was destroyed by Silver in the previous film. It's revealed there that Blofeld is alive and, as I say, has the classic facial scar that we know from the Donald Pleasance iteration, and the one that people most associate with the character. Blofeld lets Bond know that Swan is trapped somewhere in the building and that he only has 3 minutes to rescue her before explosives go off. Bond manages to save Madeleine just in the nick of time, and they escape into a boat on the River Thames. Bond's then able to shoot down Blofeld's helicopter as he's been hovering over the building waiting for it to explode to see whether or not Bond dies. The helicopter crashes down onto Westminster Bridge and Blofeld crawls from the wreckage. Bond soon catches up to him and holds him at gunpoint. Blofeld sort of eggs him on, really. Go on, kill me, essentially that he's got nothing to live for, which again really feels out of character for Blofeld. And that's more of a fault with the writing than it is with Christoph Waltz's performance or anything like that. I personally don't feel that the character of Blofeld would do that. And I don't think that he'd welcome and invite death like that. Bond ultimately chooses not to kill him and throws his firearm into the river, signalling to us, the audience, that he's resigning. As Madeleine had said earlier in the film, that she couldn't go back to the life of spies and espionage and undercover men and all that sort of thing. And he's fallen in love with Madeleine, which is really nice because it's sort of like him finding solace and moving on from Vesper. And I do like that about the arc that they've given Daniel Craig, is that he seems to be moving on. I'm pretty sure No Time to Die is going to undo it all, because realistically, how else would it work? But we'll see. But I do like that they've sort of given him that arc and that sort of momentary happiness, as it were. M then comes onto the bridge and arrests Blofeld, and I think that's really cool to see M getting involved in the action, because Rafe Fiennes is still young enough to handle his own, and I think it'd be a waste not to have him involved, really, whilst you've got such a talented actor there. Bond and Madeleine then walk off into the London evening together. The final scene of the film is sometime later, where Bond returns to Q Branch at MI6, and Q sort of gives a bit of a, "Oh, they said you'd gone, but you're back," and Bond sort of goes, "Well, I'm just here for one thing," and he gets the repaired Aston Martin DB5. The Bond theme then starts to, build up, as it does at the end of all the Daniel Craig era films. As Bond gets into the Aston Martin, Swan's in the passenger seat, and they drive off together into London. The theme blares out, da, 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 and James Bond will return. And that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is Spectre. Well, I can't believe it, folks. That's Debriefing 007 done and dusted. I'm actually a little bit shocked that I'm here. So, this film, I really enjoyed it on this most recent rewatch, but as I said at the start of this video, I know that came from the hype of knowing that I'm seeing No Time to Die in less than a week. I'm so pumped for it, I can't even tell you. When I try to watch this film, if I try and put it on for a rewatch or whatever, because it's probably my least watched Bond film, being the newest, I just turn it off when we get to the end of the scene at the Sahara Desert, and he blows it up, and I know what's coming in that third act, and I don't know what it is. I enjoyed it this time. The third act, it felt okay, and like I say, I think it's because I know what's coming in a few days. But this isn't one of the best ones, and I hope that No Time to Die is a better film on the whole than this, so that Daniel Craig can go out on a strong one. Because I suppose if you think about really the Bond actor's last films, with Connery having Diamonds Are Forever not his strongest performance, Roger Moore in A View to a Kill, much as I love it, it's really not his strongest performance, and I will openly critique that film. Licence to Kill, whilst it is my favourite of the James Bond films, it is a bit of a departure from the norm, and I can understand and appreciate why some Bond fans wouldn't like that. The less said about Die Another Day, the better, but if you want to know my thoughts, you know where the video is, folks. So I was really glad when Craig agreed that he would come back and make a fifth and final Bond film to tie the story up. And I'm really glad, I don't know what Danny Boyle was going to do, but I'm really glad that Cary Fukunaga seems to have taken on board and embraced the story of the first four films, and he's doing something to actually wrap that story up. Because it would have been so easy for them to forget about Madeleine Swan and just have Bond back on active service for the next film. And yes, that's easy, but would it have been the right thing to do? I don't know. And I suppose we'll see, won't we, after we see No Time to Die. The music, again, is provided by Thomas Newman. Now, actually, it's the opposite way around for me this time, whereas I thought the music in Skyfall was a little bit lacklustre, and that he'd lifted cues from other franchises even, not even other Bond films, but other franchises, and that it was a bit generic, the music. I actually thought in this one that some of the cues were a bit better placed, and some of the new cues that he'd written were more Bondian, if that makes sense, which I liked, and I managed to appreciate the musical score this time round. I tell you what, folks, as well, I've heard a little bit of what Hans Zimmer's bringing to the table for the new one, and I'm very excited. I won't spoil it for you, because I know some people would consider this to be a No Time to Die spoiler, but I listened to one of the excerpts that he released over the weekend, and it gave me goosebumps. And once you've seen the film and you go and listen to it, I think you'll probably know why. But I'm really excited to see what happens going forward. So my thoughts on Spectre, folks, is that it's an okay film. I hope that with No Time to Die coming out, that it will sit nicely in the story that they've built for Bond over the last sort of 16, 17 years that Daniel Craig's been James Bond. And I hope that it will age better than it has done so far, with a new film out after it, and obviously a new Bond after that, and so on and so forth. I hope that it's one that in time I'll be able to come back to and remember more fondly. Like I said earlier in the video, I wanted to talk a little bit about this set. My mum and her husband got me this for Christmas, just gone, and I would urge any Bond fan that has a 4K television and a 4K player, or a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox One, to get this set, because it is the best that these four films have ever looked. Now, I know that there's some differing opinions on the Casino Royale 4K. I personally thought it was absolutely stunning and sharp as anything, and a step up from the Blu-ray. But the final three, Quantum, Skyfall and Spectre, in particular Skyfall and Spectre, were absolutely superb. Now, at time of recording, this set is, I think, $39.99, the combined set, on Amazon and HMV for any UK viewers. And also in HMV, you've got the in-store offer of a discounted price for the individual titles if you're actually buying something else in store. So rather than them being the usual 20 quid, they're a tenner if you're buying something else in store. So if you're picking up any new releases or Heck, even if you're just buying 2 of them, you'll get one of them at a discounted price, which is a deal worth having, I would say, for the upgrade in the picture quality. They also come with the Blu-rays as well, so obviously if you want your Blu-rays still, you've still got them as well. Or you could just be a collector / hoarder like me and get every different version of the film that there is going. Because I've got a bit of a format to these videos, and I like to edit them in a certain way. Before I do the rating, I just wanted to give a couple of thank yous. The first thank you is to my lovely girlfriend Laura. You can see her in the pictures there behind me. She's been a really great support for this series and my journey in YouTube so far. Anyway, she's been my #1 champion for it, and you've probably noticed over the last sort of month, 6 weeks, that I've been very regular with these debriefing videos so that I meet the deadline for No Time to Die coming out on Thursday. And that's Laura's doing, is that I sort of got to sort of early August and I'd only got up to the Dalton films. And I sort of said to Laura, I says, well, I've stuffed it at this point, and there's no way I'm going to be able to watch and review all those films and make the videos that I want to make before September 30th, and balance work, balance the bands, and balance all the things going on in our lives at the moment. But yeah, she's been a great support, and she came up with a timetable for me. And literally sat there on a phone and went, right, okay, well, if you watch GoldenEye on this day, video the review the following day, and get it uploaded to YouTube for this date, and so on and so forth, with all the films from GoldenEye onwards up to Spectre, which we watched on Friday night just gone, you'll be able to meet your deadline. And she has metaphorically and somewhat literally cracked the whip on it as well, because there's been a few times where, like, my day job has been, you know, as it can be for all of us, quite tiresome, and you come home from work and you just think, can I be arsed setting the camera up tonight and then, you know, talking for these videos when they're unedited well over an hour? You know, can I be, you know, bothered talking for an hour to the camera and sharing that passion? Have I got the energy to bring it to you? And she's managed to get me, you know, G'd up to do it, and sort of, you know, come on, think about what you'll do and how disappointed you'll be if you miss that. And she went out with a friend of ours, my friend Phil's missus. Her and Laura are quite good friends, and they went to an antiques fair a couple of weeks ago. And she came home really excited, did Laura, and she goes, "I've got you a present, but I can't hide it from you, so I'm going to give you it early." And it's a congratulations and a well done for completing your Debriefing 007 series, because obviously I've joined YouTube and I wanted to talk about films and my love for DVDs, but this was always the thing I wanted to do on YouTube. And after finding my feet and making a few videos about collections and things like that, obviously launched this series, so she knows how much it's meant to me. But yeah, she got me this as a congratulations for completing it. So this is a picture of Sean Connery, and it is taken from, obviously, Goldfinger, as we'll know, and we've been told that it is an original cinema sort of art card, if you like, that would have been up at some point in a cinema. Now, having had it out of the frame and looking at it, I don't think it's from 1964, but it might well be from a, you know, from like a rescreening later on at some point. But it's lovely and it's framed. It's a great piece of artwork, and I'm really looking forward to putting this up soon. And what a fantastic present from my lovely girlfriend on the completion of this series. Which leads me on to the second thank you, and it links back to what I said at the start of the video, and it's a thank you to you guys. You've all been absolutely amazing in supporting not only my channel but this series, as I appreciate that it's quite a niche subject and that not everybody that probably follows the channel maybe likes James Bond, and certainly not to the same extent that I do. But for those of you that have followed this series on the channel from the get-go, I'm incredibly humbled and I'm over the moon with your support. And, you know, there's too many of you to shout out individually, but I really, really do appreciate all your support, all your kind comments, your lovely words, your shares, your likes. It's, like I say, it's humbling, it's heartwarming, and for you guys to embrace a project that means so much to me is just brilliant. So thank you so much. I genuinely mean that. I think all that's left for me to do now that I've rambled on for as long as I have, folks, is to rate Spectre. And as always, I'm rating it based on the recent rewatch. And this time round, I think I'm going to give it 6.5 out of 10. Well, there we are, folks. That has been Debriefing 007, ranking the films and then reviewing from Dr. No all the way through to No Time to Die. Let me know your thoughts on Spectre down below in the comments. I really would be interested to hear them. What are your thoughts and your theories maybe going into No Time to Die as well? It seems like a perfect time to start maybe talking about those as well. Don't forget to leave the video a thumbs up if you haven't done already, and if you're not already subscribed to my channel and you're finding me for the first time, please think about subscribing to the channel. I'd love to have you stick around a little bit longer, and of course it helps the channel to grow as well. Above all else, folks, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you after No Time to Die. We've made it. Have a good one, folks.